Hello, and welcome back to Armageddon Empires. So, figured I wanted to try another deck, and I've been playing around with this a little bit, and I'm kind of at a point right now that I think I might be able to do a recorded version of it. And in the last episode, I had asked people what they would like to see me play next, or which faction they would like to see me play next. And there was a request from Zeb, who is one of my most frequent commenters. I believe he's commented on pretty much every video I've released, actually, who asked if I might be interested in taking a crack at the Xenos. And I thought that was a cool idea. They're a faction that I'm not terribly familiar with, but I've been playing around with them a bit off camera here, and I think I've got a bit more of a handle on them. And so I figured I would take you through the deck that I have been working on. This isn't necessarily the final form, but it's probably getting pretty close to it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit generally about the Xenos as a whole first. So they are a faction that relies quite heavily on horde tactics, which is not something that I normally do. I mean, the 40 card deck is kind of my happy place, and a 40 card deck does not combine well with horde tactics. But the Xenos do have a workaround for that I'll get to in a moment. And they're an interesting faction in that I think they do very well against the Empire and against the Free Mutants, because a lot of their units will damage biological units to a greater degree. They struggle a little bit against the machines, though they do have some tech that can help with that. But overall, they're an interesting faction. They play quite differently than the others, I think, or I feel at least. And yeah, so let's start going through it. First of all, let's take a look at these xenolarvapods. I think these are a really key component of xenopod deck, because what they do, they cost 0 action points to deploy. They're terrible. They do nothing. They don't even move. Like, they can't move at all. But what you can do is, at a cost of 2 action points and 4 humans, they will automatically evolve into either a xenogite or a xenomorph at random, which is a really cool way to bulk out your army. And the Xenos also have a high-level genetics card that lets them just sort of generate these things, spawn them out. So if you go for that, you can start spitting out these xenopod larvae all over the place, and, well, not all over the place, wherever you have that facility built, and really just create some massive armies out of nothing. So that's really cool. And I did include a number of them in my deck, specifically because they are cheap. And as you can see, I've gone over my normal self-imposed limit of 100 points here. And the Xenos help keep that down. So realistically, the rest of my deck is pretty focused on a lot of fairly elite stuff. Now, if we go take a look at what I picked for the Xenogites. The Xenogites are basically the basic infantry of the Xenopods. So they're human hosts mated to a Xenopod larvae. The host is both consumed and genetically transformed into a different creature. And I've kind of gone for a bit of a spread here, mostly because I'm still not 100% sure which ones I like the best. I do like Psychers. They're extremely potent against any biological unit. They're terrible against the Machine Empire, but against humans or the Free Mutants, they can be devastating because they do a 7-die attack that only allows them to defend with their resistance. So yeah, that can be absolutely devastating. to any kind of human or, well, biological unit. Very useless against the machines and relatively expensive to deploy, but in a specialist role, these guys can be devastating. That's one other thing with the Xenopods, is they tend to rely a huge amount on human resources, because they're taking people and turning them into like this nonsense, like by eating them and popping out of their chests and all that good stuff. Anyhow, I haven't taken any of the gluttons, mainly because I don't particularly like the berserk ability. They've got a very high attack and good hit points and all that sort of stuff, but gaining attack in exchange for defense upon getting hit just seems like a bit of a self-defeating prophecy to me. I don't like things that hurt my defense, generally speaking, and berserk does that. So beasts, on the other hand, are handy just because they can have the extra attachment, and I mean, you saw how effective that was with the Imperial Infantry. It's not quite as good with these guys because the Xenos don't have tactical nukes, but it's still quite helpful. So yeah. The brutes are kind of cool. They do critical damage. Their stats overall are lower. Like if you compare them to the gluttons, 6 attack, 4 defense versus 4 attack, 4 defense, and as well as fewer hit points. But they get +1 attack for the duration of the battle every time they destroy an enemy unit, and they also cost fewer human resources to deploy, which human resources are always in demand for the Xenos. So I kind of like the brutes. The critical damage is no joke either. That is pretty awesome. One other thing you'll probably notice here is that the Xenos armies by default are very slow, and they, unlike the humans, they don't have those cheetahs, so they don't really have anything that can boost up their ability to move around the strategic map. So movement can be a bit of a problem for that. That does fortunately get solved for the most part by their leaders. So the Xenos tend to be a faction, I think, that relies quite heavily on their generals. I mean, everybody relies heavily on their generals, but in terms of the actual bonuses their generals provide, I think the Xenos are very reliant on that. So the xenomorphs are basically the Xenos equivalent of like the power battle armor, and they got some cool ones here. That said, I don't have very many of them, mostly because the good ones all cost quite a few points. But I guess we'll go bottom to top here to get to the ones that I did actually take. So didn't take the degenerates because flank attack is so situational. And in terms of overall toughness, these guys just don't quite cut the mustard for me. Hellions can be pretty potent, but again, in terms of the costs for them, one thing you'll notice here too is the xenogites pretty much all cost materials, whereas the xenomorphs all cost energy. And if you look at their little flavor text here, pure biological fighting machines created through accelerated and self-directed evolution and a tremendous amount of food. So the xenomorphs tend to be quite expensive in terms of human resources, and they also cost energy, which isn't something that I otherwise tend to put a lot into with the xenopods. So yeah, the horrors can potentially be quite good. Like with this assault ability, they can get up to attack 10, which is darn good, but it also lowers them down to defense 3, which is less good. Again, things that hurt my defense, I don't tend to like. I mean, I used assault a couple of times in the Imperial video, or in the Imperial Let's Play, but only kind of when I already knew I had a battle won and I just wanted to eliminate something. So realistically, I'm paying 4 human resources and 3 energy for a 6 attack, 5 defense unit, which, I mean, is it that much better than one of these beasts? Not really, especially once you stick an extra attachment on them. The Abominations, on the other hand, are very potent. 10 hit points, 7 attacks, 7 defense, plus shock attack makes them very, very capable. They're expensive to field, but well worth it, I've found. And then the last one here is the Monstrosity, and I have 2 of them in the deck because with this kind of a stat line, along with double attack and neurotoxin, these guys are terrifying to fight. Gonna skip over Biomecha for just a second and pop down to Reconnaissance, because I would argue this is a distinct weakness of the Xenos. They don't have great recon. You've got basically 2 options. You've got the critters, who are useless in a fight, don't have stealth, and don't have commando, don't have anything like that. So these guys are basically like a Imperial Recon without stealth, which sucks. I mean, they're cheap, but they still take up a spot in your deck, and they cost you 3 action points to draw, or is it 2 action points for the Xenos? I can't remember. Xenos, I think, draw cards at 2, but still, takes a spot in your hand. Yeah. The consorts aren't much better. They do have a better recon, so strength 6, range 2, as opposed to, strength 6, range 1, but worse attack. And they're actually expensive to field. 2 action points, 1 human, 1 energy, and 1 tech. So that's why I just have 2 critters in my deck. The bulk of my recon, I actually plan on relying on these guys, the gangrels. Expensive units. But they have stealth, they have reconnaissance, and they have commando. So these guys are basically like the Imperial Rangers. With higher hit points, worse defense, basically. So out of a bad batch of recon, I think these gangrels are the best, and then the critters are mostly kind of used for defensive recon, but that lack of stealth really hurts them. So yeah. As for battle support, again, not great options with the Xenos. I have a single spore mortar. This is not bad. But it's only range 2, which means if it's in the back row, it can only hit the front row, which kind of sucks. You can't use it to take out enemy artillery, but it does do disrupt and disable, so that's kind of nice. Mediocre attack, though. Like, I mean, this is the same as the Minotaurs, so I mean, you compare it to a Grom or the Reaper, and this is just a joke. Terrible hit points, just like every other artillery. But again, kind of the best of a bad bunch. A similar issue with the enzyme thrower. These guys disable, they've got slightly better attack. Same defense, but lower hit points. And they cost you energy. I mean, these are kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They're both kind of equivalent. Neither of them are fantastic. Sand teams can be useful. Xenos don't have a huge number of answers to enemy air. But anti-air 6, like if you're getting hit by a Nightwing or something like that, you might as well just fling spitballs at them. You're better off just trying to... You're kind of stuck just dealing with enemy air attacks as the Xenos. I would argue they're in even a worse spot than the Free Mutants for it. At least the Free Mutants have super cheap missile launchers that they can fire around all over the place. I mean, these guys aren't expensive either, but air-to-air 6 ain't great. And the Free Mutants also have a really cheap tech card that they can throw onto any unit that turns them into a SAM team. Mobile Hive is just a supply source, and Mobile Bioharvester collects humans and energy resources. So I don't tend to pay much attention to them. Special op teams. So the standout here, well, let's go through them. So the Psyker team is weird and situational. Again, it only works against biological units, but it can make them fight each other, which is kind of cool. Have them start slapping each other around, but far too situational, I think. And especially considering how fragile they are. They're decent in the back line, though. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made for putting a couple of these guys in your back line. They could do some work back there, but one enemy artillery unit and these guys are done. So, yeah. Assassination teams, I don't tend to like these in general. I find they're pretty suboptimal. They can do the sniper thing, they can do the assassin thing, not very well. They're cheap, but I've never gotten these sorts of teams for any of the factions to do much of anything, whether you're looking at the Imperial Commandos or the robot kill teams or whatever they are. They just don't do much. You use heroes to assassinate other heroes, or better yet, you kill their army and capture them. That works even better. The standout here is the Demolitions team, and that is because they have Engineer. And so I included two of them, just like how I included the Imperial Engineers, because, again, I would like my heroes doing hero things rather than going around and building scrap collectors. So the nice thing about these guys, I actually really like them. I think they're a fantastic unit just because of that stealth. So they can go out, build a collector with their engineering ability, and then stealth up. And in the later game, you can use them to try and blow up enemy facilities, which is also kind of cool. So, yeah. Air power. The Xenoscepter is basically there as my anti-air attempt. It's a terrible fighter, but it'll at least let me intercept something sometimes. I don't know. I might take this out of my deck and replace it with something else just because it is attack 4, defense 4. It's pretty mediocre. The pod hover ship, on the other hand, is quite good. Attack of 8 plus precision strike. Only has a range of 1, but it is a helicopter. So, I mean, weird looking helicopter for sure, but, you know, floating blob, sure, why not? But 8 precision strike is incredibly good for taking out enemy artillery before a big fight or anything like that. It's got a lot of hit points for aircraft at least, and yeah, it's this is a good unit. You do have to be careful with them because as you deploy them, they do take hit point damage. So you have to periodically fix them if you're relying on it a lot. But realistically, probably what I should do is ditch the Xenoscepter and get a second pod hover ship. It's just that good. And again, just hope the enemy doesn't have air cards of their own. Okay, so on to the generals. Xenopod generals are in an interesting place. How do I want to tackle these guys? First of all, I am not going to pronounce any of their names. Slugpaw, Sitilfagan, Raleigh. Hey, I know that one. I've read my H.P. Lovecraft. But yeah, so those are the generals. Now, the cool thing about pretty much all of the Xenos generals, well, let's talk about the ones that I don't have first. So this guy here, Tactical Genius. I mean, you saw how useful that was in the game, in the Empire of Man game, but it's also combined with Trickster. So I really don't like Trickster. I do like Tactical Genius, but don't like Trickster. I'm leaning towards no with him, but I have played around with him. He's not terrible. Just don't find him that useful, especially because his army is then still plodding around at 2 hexes per turn. Relay, he is +2 to attack and defense, which is very good. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a good commander, but again, the slow movement hurts. Shirub, again, it's another Trickster, this time combined with Raider, so whatever. As for the 3 that I did pick, Slugpaw here has Leader, which increases his army's movement rate, and Pathfinder, which reduces the cost to move his army. So that's a nice, really, really nice combo. He can move quickly, and he can get to where I need him to be. I like that in a general. So his armies will be moving at speed 4, and he'll be reducing the action point cost as well, which is always good, because later in the game, like unless you luck out capturing enemy heroes or something like that, one thing I really find with the Xenos is that action points become a issue. So something to consider. This guy is similar. He doesn't have quite as good a leader ability. He goes down to leader 1, but he still has the Pathfinder 2, and he has Tactician. So he's kind of a backup tactician. He can move quickly, or reasonably quickly, and reduces the movement point cost. So that is good as well. And then this guy is a leader and a raider. I might actually ditch him. I'd keep going back and forth between taking him or taking Relay, with the idea being that Relay could then be a more defensive hero. And realistically, I think I might actually do that. So let's add him in. There you go, Relay. Join the team. Scouts, I don't have either. The Xenos scouts are not good. Mainly because the Xenos Recon in general is not good. That's just the case. He can make guys go faster. He can do stealth. I mean, this guy would be awesome if he were combined. I mean, he'd be decent as a commander for these gangrels. But and I mean, realistically, elusive, like if he's getting hunted, it means his army's dead. So how does elusive help him, right? Oh yeah, sorry, I skipped I went to the wrong guy. This guy's the guy that could potentially lead the gangrels, because he's got the bounty hunter as well as scout and master scout. So this guy's a guy that I would definitely consider including. Shog here, on the other hand, no. Again, if he's relying on elusive, something's already gone horribly, horribly wrong, and yeah. Agents is another thing that the Xenos kind of suck at. Are you seeing a theme here? Basically, the Xenos strategy is to overwhelm them with flesh. So Illith here is an assassin and can pick a target, which can be good for taking out like an enemy intellector or somebody like that, like an enemy researcher. But the ability to specifically target an enemy with an assassin value of 6 just doesn't, it's not going to kill anything that I absolutely need dead, which is what I would normally use an assassin for, right? Migo here is the same deal, except he's a saboteur, and saboteurs are even less useful than assassins. The one that I did include is this nonsense here, because if I get him into a stronghold, presumably my home base, where there is the Intel Center and an Academy, so with both of those, he'll give me extra action points and extra action points, and also makes it easier to do tactics cards, and makes it easier to pick up enemy units, like stealth units. So, not the worst as a defensive hero, or a defensive agent. Intellects. Now this is where is definitely some potential, and I think this is where some of the strengths of the Xenos are really going to start to shine. First up, you've got the Cryeg Queen. So adds 3 dice to any tech or genetics cards. Bodyguard you don't really care about. Might help prevent her from getting assassinated. But also increases action points. So action point economy, once you start getting some of these guys out, can be pretty darn good. And then tech and genetics card creation. The Xenos are, it's actually something that I'm starting to quite like about them, is some of their tech and some of their genetics is very good. Zotham I didn't include. He does increase the maximum hand size, but I think that might make more sense if I was actually running a bigger deck, which maybe I'll do with the Xenos at some point. I think these guys might be a fun faction to play as like a massive, on a huge map with all 3 AIs and cults going on. I think the Xenos, that's where they'd really show their strength. They're definitely a late game faction. And if that's the case and I've got a bigger deck, then having that increased hand size would be helpful. And also his ability to move units around is helpful. But in a game of this scale, he's not going to help me that much. This fellow here increases supply range, which is a problem for the Xenos for sure. The Xenos units in general do struggle a bit with supply, and then reduces the cost to draw cards by 2, which is also really good. Lets you burn through the deck quicker. But really what I have him for is that logistics. This would come more into play if I was playing a bigger deck. Other than that, the big things here, so I left these 2 out just because they're too specialized. I did include Yaglonna with the geneticist and technologist because the Xenos tech is quite good, and I'll actually pull it up here in a moment. And then here we have a geneticist and a tactician. And tactics are just always useful. So that's why I included Glakiel, or Glaki? Glaki. Sinotheg. So basically you have a choice here, either to go with a geneticist or a technologist. And overall, I would argue that the Xenos genetics are better than their tech. So, let's take a look at the Xenos genetics cards. You have this Invigoration Serum, plus 3 hit points. Okay, cool. That's nice. Toss it on a Xenogite. Cool. It gives them extra hit points. Electrospores are your answers to the machines. Gives them EMP of 6. That lets them do, I can't remember if it's a flat 6 damage or if it's 6 dice against a mechanical unit. So this helps counter the fact that so many of the Xenos' other units are focused around the idea of killing biological stuff. Revitalization Sac is very, very cool. You throw this on one of your xenomorphs. So that's one of these guys here. The monstrosity, abomination, all that stuff. And what it does is if they hit 0 hit points, they immediately heal completely, and the card gets discarded. So that's cool. Revitalization or Revelation Serum is just a good all-around boost to heroes. The Empire of Man has one like this as well. I didn't end up using it because I didn't need it in the last game, but this is a very handy thing that you can use to boost up a hero. The anti-necrotic tissue regeneration, or the anti-necrotic tissue, gives regeneration 1 to Biomecha, which reminds me, I forgot to show you the other Biomecha that I included. I included a single destroyer because he's a beast. He's a big old stompy robot that kills things very effectively. I only have one, but it's a very good unit. And you throw something like that anti-necrotic tissue on him, and he's very potent indeed. Last up, and this is the card that I think is probably the most important to the Xenos, is this Brood Hive. And this is why you really want to focus on genetics more than anything else. It lets you spit out those eggs. And once you have this up and running, you have an unlimited army size, basically. As long as you can keep feeding human resources into the Brood Hive and into those eggs, you've got effectively an unlimited army. So yeah, that's the Xenos genetics. Now, they do have some pretty effective tech as well. So the Warlord here is bad. It's not a good gun. +1 attack, armor piercing 1. It's basically a laser rifle that consistently rolls minimum damage. Woo. The Psychic Enhancer is quite good for a hero though. +3 fate isn't a joke. And being able to get those rerolls in, definitely helpful. The Death Rod, on the other hand, it's a tougher thing to build than the lasers were, but it gives you energy weapon 6. And if you combine both of these on one of those, where are they here? The beasts with their extra attach, that gets them up to attack 7, armor piercing 1, energy weapon 6, which makes them pretty darn scary, especially if you throw the extra hit points on them and stuff like that. They're pretty powerful. Sensor drones can also be pretty useful. It's kind of your answer to your terrible recon. You can put these on your army and pretty effectively spot enemy stealth units. This is... it's basically like a cluster bomb. So +2 attack, it does 3 extra damage. You throw this on your gunship pod helicopter thing, and it does a +10 or a 10 die attack with the damage multiplied by 3. That'll kill just about anything. And sorry, give me half a second here. Apologies, had to cough. And then the remote viewer is basically like a recon type thing that you can just go and check out enemy units. And then the last up is the Xenos Tactics, and the Xenos do have some very good tactics cards, I think. So you can turn success dice into failure, and that's a really easy card to create. Make your opponent just straight up lose fate points. You play this at the beginning of a fight, and all of a sudden they lose all their rerolls. That's kind of cool. Reroll success dice into failure, minus enemy success dice, or force them to reroll their entire pool. There's nothing that will boost you, is one catch, but you can devastate enemy rolls with your fate cards. And leveraging that can be pretty nasty, I think. But yeah, other than that, Most of the rest of it's pretty standard. Like everybody basically has these. I have a single. My stronghold is the crashed hive ship. It's the basic one. No hardening. Supply barracks collects stuff. The tunnel hive would give you hardened. But again, if you're getting nuked, the game's basically done anyhow. And then the fortress hive gives a defensive bonus, which, again, if you're getting your stronghold attacked, you're in trouble. As for facilities, I did a sub-hive, same deal as the Imperial Firebase. The hidden hive is the same deal. It's kind of their equivalent of the keep, only instead of giving a defensive bonus, it camouflages you. Oh, interesting. Oh, okay. Actually, I have this backwards. I need to take the hidden hive, give that. That's the cheaper of the two. Both to deploy and to... or both in terms of points and in terms of cost to deploy. But yeah, and then research facilities kind of speak for themselves. I do have 2 research nests. Again, that's because of the importance of those tech cards, the genetics cards. Single war nest, no brood pens, which would just collect humans and energy, and then a single intel nest. The nice thing about the intel nest is it does have sniffer. So even though they don't have, so unlike the humans, with sniffer, it lets you, if you've got this deployed, it will let you detect enemy units in your base, which can be really, really helpful. Again, just because the Xenos Recon ain't great. Anyhow, onto my tiles. With 10 points, I did the Panoptic Wastes and the Spawning Grounds. I will normally build into the Spawning Grounds first, and then use a hero to build the materials, so that I'd be able to get the demolition team out, because they do take a materials resource. Once that's done, though, this gives me a total of 3 human resources, 2 energy and 2 science, as well as the 1 material, which I think is a really strong start for these guys. Like you'll see, even like this destroyer, he only takes 1 material resource. You don't need much material. You need a lot of humans, though. A lot of humans. That's your bread and butter. A fair bit of energy as well, but very, very little in terms of material. So, yeah. Anyhow, not sure when I'm actually going to get around to doing the Let's Play for this. Life is busy, but if you have any thoughts on the deck, I am uploading this before I start doing the Let's Play. So if you have ideas for the deck, things that you might want me to include, if you are familiar with the Xenos and have ideas, things I might be overlooking, please let me know. Like I said, this is a faction that I'm not greatly familiar with, so still definitely in the learning curve aspect of things with it. But yeah, I guess that's really about all there is to say. I've been having some fun with them. I think I'm sold on them. Didn't really go over some of the other units here. The Reavers are interesting, but again, they've got the assault problem. And then the Corruptor I didn't include because he's too expensive. But yeah, I think other than that, I did cover most of the units. So, oh, and some of these guys, the drones, dredges, and vassals. Vassals are useless. Wave attack, rapid reaction, garbage that just gets... its purpose is to die. And, sorry, coughed again. Dredges, again, You want to lower a unit down to 1 defense for... Yeah, no thank you. Drones could be interesting. Rapid reaction, fast deployment. But nothing else about the Xenos really screams speed. So... these guys would be good as reinforcements, I guess. And I suppose it might play in well if you were taking losses, which does seem to happen more frequently with the Xenos. So that's a possibility, I guess. Might be worthwhile to have a couple of them kicking around in your hand just so you can reinforce an army. But anyhow, I have rambled enough. I will catch you next time. And if I don't see you in Might and Magic, then I will see you once I start playing with the Xenos here. So until then, cheers.